Well, friends, I am so excited to meet now. Michelle and I have kind of quote unquote known each other for a long time. This is our first time actually meeting one another, being able to talk
Mhm.
to one another on the podcast. So thank you, podcast listeners, for allowing us to do this. But Michelle, this is funny because we're so excited now because we've just met, but I'm gonna turn so quickly. I'm gonna turn so quickly. In your new book,
Yeah.
you talk about lament. And here we
Yes.
are, we're talking on the Happy Home podcast,
Yeah.
and we are definitely full of joy, and we have this sense of anticipation and excitement. But we don't want that to be ungenuine. We don't want it to be like, oh, I'm doing fine, when you're really like, I am in mourning. Like I have
Yes.
brokenness all around me. So your book starts with these practices. Why did you start with
Yeah,
lament
I
on
know,
purpose?
right?
And then help us understand, what does lament
Yeah,
mean?
absolutely. Well, it's interesting, and I'm going to share this with you. I haven't shared this in any other interviews up until now. My editor, even when she first cracked open my book and read the original, manuscript, said, "Why are we starting with lament? Isn't that a little bit of a downer?" And I thought that's a very valid question. I
Yeah.
said, it may seem like that unless you are someone who's been through suffering that's looking for a faith that does not fail. And to
Mhm.
start anywhere else will be disingenuous,
Yes.
right?
I love that.
So, for those of you who have struggled, whose life has not gone according to plan, who are wrestling with what you believe because your circumstances tempt you to think that God is either not real or he's abandoned you, that is why we started lament. We tend to think of lament, by the way, by definition, lament is the vocalization of grief. So, grief is when we mourn something we've lost. It could be the loss of our health. It could be the loss of a person, the loss of a job, the loss of a dream. Let's say you dreamed that someday, that you would have these beautiful kids that you have, and they would all grow up to be perfect adult human beings making
Right.
$100,000 a year and
Yeah.
living in a safe house and completely adjusted and mature and everything. And then all of a sudden you realize that they're individual humans and they're imperfect, right? And so it could be a loss like that, where you're just grieving kind of what your dream for a happy home was. Lament takes it beyond just the feeling of sadness to actually the expression of it,
Mm.
right? The
Yeah.
reason this is important is because you and I, we tend to think that lament or grief and happiness are separate activities, that they are mutually exclusive. You can either be sad or you can be happy.
Yeah.
You can grieve or you can praise, but they cannot be done at the same time. So we think of it like a penny and a dime, right? So
Yeah.
they're two separate coins. And what I am learning through my own experience, but also reading the Bible and kind of studying other people's stories, is that grief and praise, sadness and joy are actually two sides of the dime,
Mm.
right? They're two sides of the
Yeah.
same coin. They go together, they're simultaneous, and one supports the weight of the other, and vice versa. In other words, it's our grief that makes our joy all the more profound. It is our joy that adds richness to the sense of our loss, kind of like
Yeah.
the quote, you know, that that feeling of grief only comes when we've loved deeply, right? It is the
Right.
love, the grief that testifies to the existence of the love. That's what it is. And so starting to view our sadness and happiness as two sides of the same coin gives us permission to hold both in tandem rather than needing to stuff our sadness in order to pretend like we're happy,
I
which
love,
is
yeah.
never good for anyone.
Yeah. How have you found this in your own life? I even think of listening to your voice, right?
Mm,
And I'm sure there was a time when that you lament, I wish I had my old voice,
yes.
but this is the voice I have. So kind of take us there with that dime of both sides.
Yeah. Oh gosh, that's a great question, by the way, and I can feel that in my bones.
Yeah.
I still miss my old voice every
Yeah.
now and then because I recorded all kinds of videos and podcasts and audios long before my voice changed. Every now and then, one of them will pop up on YouTube or pop up somewhere, and I'll hear my old voice, and I won't even recognize myself.
Mm.
Um, in addition to that, my husband has his own business, and his voicemail for his business is me recording the voicemail before all of my surgeries.
Yeah.
So anytime I call and get the voicemail for his business, I hear my old self. That is a legitimate loss.
Mhm.
And I've had countless friends and colleagues and people say, "Oh, your voice sounds great. I don't even notice a difference. It sounds wonderful," and blah, blah, blah. And the truth is, it's quite a miracle that I can talk the way that I do. But
Yes.
the miracle that I can speak doesn't negate the grief of how I used to speak.
Yeah.
They are both true.
Mhm.
For those who don't know a bit of my story, I back in 2010, when I was a 39-year-old mom with kids still at home, on a Tuesday before Thanksgiving, I found out, I got a phone call from the doctor and found out that day I had squamous cell carcinoma of the tongue. So, cancer of the tongue. And I make my living as a speaker, a communicator. I've done hundreds and hundreds of videos and audios and TV and radio and everything else. And the very thing that's the means of my ministry and my business, quite frankly, was affected by cancer. And not once, but 3 times. It came back 3 times. The most serious of which required me to have a 9-hour surgery where 2/3 of my tongue was removed, as well as multiple lymph nodes and glands and blood vessels in my neck. My arm was cut open from wrist to elbow to kind of take vessels and tissue to rebuild myself. I was basically Humpty Dumpty. They took me apart and put me back together again. But the me that got put back together again will never be like the old me. And so I daily live in the tension of what was, what is, and mourning what was, while also being grateful for what is. And
Yeah.
the only reason that I can hold those two in tension without succumbing to my grief is the hope of what will be,
Yes.
right? And so God
Yeah.
says someday, He says, "Behold, I am making all things new."
Yeah.
And I feel even a big old lump come in my throat at the thought of this. This is a real hope for me. It is something
Yes.
that I have to think about on a daily basis. That what was is gone. I can't do anything about it. What is just ridiculously imperfect and uncomfortable. But what will be will make everything else before pale in comparison. And
Right.
that's what allows me to hold two sides of that coin together while I walk out the present, knowing that the future is coming.